Skylum released Luminar AI update number 4. To me, this is probably one of the best updates we've seen yet. There are several bug fixes. There are some new features in here. I'm going to go over them and give you some highlights. We're going to go and do other videos to dive deeper into some of the new things. But in this update, you're going to find Portrait Bokeh AI. You're going to find improvements to the Sky AI tool and some really cool improvements to the texture local adjustment. I think you're going to like them. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Hi, my name is William Beem. I'm a photographer just like you. I'm going to start this off with a little bit of a slideshow to go over some of the bullets, mostly to make sure that I don't miss things when I'm doing the demonstration. So we'll do a little bit of the slideshow at first, then we'll go in and do a demonstration so I can show you what we're talking about. So I'll try to get through the slides quickly, but I just want to make sure that I captured the key points to share with you. So with that in mind, here is our little slide deck of information for Luminar AI update number 4. And we'll start off with the bug fixes for Mac OS. I'm going to go through these rather quickly. You can do a screen freeze later on if you want to look at something, in more depth. But it's going to be able to open and edit Luminar AI as a Photos for Mac OS extension without errors. Basically, the Photos app on Mac OS had some problems with the integration. If you're on Windows, don't worry about it. This is the Mac section. You can add transparent PNG textures to your photos without artifacts. They allow you to view the custom textures that load right away. So even if you leave and go back to the textures, so they've fixed a bug there. You can find the controls for placing sky objects and textures in the correct location instead of the bottom left corner of your photo. And when I've been working with this, it seems to take up the entire photo, and then you can resize it as you want to. But that way, you've got an easier way to find this. Crop a photo in Composition AI to a small ratio using Sky AI or Augmented Sky AI without a hitch. I never had this problem, but I imagine some Mac people did because otherwise there wouldn't be a bug fix. And also it works smoothly now with masking in the show mask mode. This one I have experienced, particularly since I've got an older computer. Sometimes I could be painting on a mask, I wouldn't see it. So it's working much better now. And this last one, use the Shift and the bracket keys, so the left and right, and the hotkeys to more smoothly adjust the softness slider when in the masking mode. So hold down Shift and then hit your bracket keys left or right, and that kind of increments or decrements the softness slider. Let's take a look at our Windows bug fixes. Add transparent PNG textures without artifacts. That was the same thing we saw on the Mac as well. You can use Luminar AI as a Photoshop or Lightroom plugin to see the right side templates and edit tabs without a hitch. Didn't know that was a problem. Better disk space optimization. Well, that's always a good thing. Export photos in RAW format without experiencing crashes. No crashes is a good thing. Work in Augmented Sky AI, and Atmosphere AI without memory leaks and crashes. Open templates created in Luminar AI on a Mac OS system. This one is kind of important because a lot of photographers do use Mac. They create templates and they share them, or particularly if you buy some of them from somebody and they don't work, or you couldn't even load them in the first place. Now you've got a greater access to templates that someone created on a Mac system. Export multiple photos while retaining the original resolution. And let's go ahead into some of the features we're looking at for the tools. One of the things I think you're really going to like, and I'll show in the demo for Sky AI, is the better positioning for the horizon. In the past, they had these sliders inside of the tool that you'd kind of position up and down, left and right. Now it looks like a gradient tool. Basically, you just drag it down to where the horizon should be, and then you can use the sliders in the toolbar to move the sky left and right without losing position on the horizon too much. So, like I said, works like a gradient tool. And because it's a gradient, it's easier to feather. You can drag those little expanded lines up or down or closer to the horizon line. You can rotate it much more easily because there are times that maybe you don't want your horizon line to be perfectly straight. So just like a regular gradient tool, you can move it around as you need to. The texture tool improvements. This is for local adjustments. There's a new browser, and it really looks a lot like what we've seen with Sky replacements. So you can load your own textures. I have a plethora of textures. It's much easier now to work with them. So you can load them on. So you can load them inside of the texture tool, much like the previous update where you could load your own skies. So you can have your folders there to load in your own textures and then just pick them from the menu. There are new default textures. There's some light leaks, there's some sparklers, and a few other things. So they've basically given you a few more tools to work with the texture. If you have a watermark, put it in there as a PNG and maybe put that in your own folder. You can easily add it there, scale it down to the size that you want to. It's much better than some of the convoluted ways that I've shown in the past. Blend mode support is there. So now your textures, depending upon the blend mode and the type of photograph you have, you can do some cool and creative things. All right, Portrait Bokeh AI. This one, when you start off, it takes a moment for Luminar AI to map the photo, and it's trying to do a few things. First off, it needs to create a mask for the subject inside of your photograph. And second, it's also mapping what appears to be depth in the photo. In other words, front to back along the Z-axis, because there's a tool inside of the Portrait Bokeh AI that lets you move your bokeh back and forth. All the processing is happening on your local computer. It's not going up to the cloud. If you've used Photoshop and it uses a lot of cloud tools, you can move a slider, you've got to wait for it. You move the slider again, you've got to wait because it's going up to the cloud and coming back. And depending upon how busy the traffic is, your internet speed, and how busy their servers are, you can spend some time moving those sliders back and forth. Here, all the mapping happens up front on your computer. Once it's mapped, then you can start moving your sliders. Now, once processed, Luminar remembers that photo. So you don't have to process the photo over and over again every time you open it up. Luminar will remember in its catalog what the depth mapping was, where the subject, masking is on that photograph. So that's nice. And like I said, it's all local to your computer. One thing to note, usually when Luminar is thinking, that little Luminar AI logo up in the upper left corner is kind of vibrating, is what I call it. But basically it's got a little graphic pattern that's animated and you can see that it's thinking. That doesn't happen in this tool. I don't know why. It's just that you have to wait, and it's usually a few seconds, depending on the speed of your computer. And then once it's done, it's mapped it, you can go ahead and start using the tools. Now, if you've got a slow computer like I do, you can let it start mapping that with the Portrait Bokeh AI tool. You can go off and use another tool and come back and then use the Portrait Bokeh AI. But I have not found that it's that long. I've got an old 2014 Core i5 iMac. I'd say probably 5 to 10 seconds is what it takes to map most of the photos on this system. All right, so as I mentioned, the depth control allows you to move the bokeh. You can get very close to the subject, unbelievably close, or you can move it back. And I'll show you a little bit of that in the demo as well, too. This is a human subject-only tool. So don't expect it to work on inanimate objects. I asked, does it work on dogs? They said no. I haven't tested it on dogs, but if you try it on a dog and it works, that's great. If you try it on a dog and it doesn't work, it's not intended to. It's intended to work on human subjects. There is also a masking option here where you can extend the mask. You can brush it in or you can brush it away in case there's something close to the human that should be masked in and instead is showing blurry. So that's, I've got a photograph of someone who's holding a flag and it was showing blurry when it was in the same plane as the subject was. I could just easily brush that in. It worked fine. So, and that's what I meant. I'm getting ahead of my buttons here so you can add and remove from the mask. Now, one other thing I wanted to tell you, I've got a course. It's called Luminar AI Element. And basically, it covers everything inside of Luminar, including these updates. So that means that when a new update comes out, I add to the course. It is available for free to anyone who buys Luminar AI with my affiliate code, which is Beem. That'll give you $10 off. If you did not buy from me, that's okay. It's available for purchase at $47. And if you check in the link in the description below, you can go to the course page. It'll tell you how you can send me your receipt if you bought using my affiliate code. I'll verify it and give you access to the course. Or if you just want to sign up and pay for $47 because you've already got Luminar AI, that information is there too. So basically, you can go to williambeem.com/courses, but there's another link that's in the system below that takes you straight to that page. All right, enough talking about that. Let's go ahead and start our demo. The first thing I want to start with are the changes to Sky AI. So we can go over here and select our Sky. I'm going to choose over here something that's one of my own folders. And I think I'm going to make this like a sunny day. So blue sky. Once you've chosen it, you just kind of click off to the side over here. And then you can change things around. So your horizon position, click this button. In the past, well, we had these little sliders over here and some others. Now you have this. And on a photograph like this, where there's a mountain and you can see the lake, the reflection really matters at the actual horizon line of the lake. So you can quickly and easily move this down here, and it affects the reflection below. So I'm going to put it right there. I'm going to click this to turn it off. And now I've got this, and we can start working with the other tools. So you need to, you can always flip. If you want to change the vertical position, you can still do that. These tools work as they did before. And if you take it too far in the other way, you can move this horizon line back up. So that still works, but it's much easier to position the vertical position using that gradient tool. Now, if you want to shift the sky from side to side, you can do that as well too. If you need to relight, don't forget to use this Relight Human. Even if you don't see humans in there, they've kind of changed the software behind it. And sometimes it really helps to use Relight Human on different subjects where you need to mask things in or change the lighting. Don't forget, on our reflection amount, we can go over here and bump that up. You can still blur out the water if you want to, and you can kind of change things around. Now, also remember, as you can see the reflection of the mountain, you can also see the reflection of the sky that was up there. So when you choose a sky, choose something that works with your subject in the original one we did. So if I change this from a bright blue sky to something that's a bit more of a sunset, that kind of works a little bit better. So we can check, make sure the horizon, I think, should be where I left it. Yep, right there. So now we've still got our reflection from the subject matter that was in there. This sky works very well. But notice the sun is over here and the lighting is really kind of coming off from the other side. So I'm going to flip this around. And I'm going to defocus the sky just a little bit to kind of fade it back behind the mountain, because I want the mountain to stand out. To me, it's not the fisherman or this area here or the village. It's really the mountain in my idea that's the subject here. So defocusing the sky just a little bit helps bring the sharpness of this out. And we can add a little bit of atmospheric haze. Clearly there's some haze on the water. We can make the sky a little bit hazy. You can change the warmth. So if this is supposed to be a sunset or sunrise, we can add a little bit of warmth there. You can add or reduce the brightness of your sky. So you can make it whatever works for you. I'm going to take some of the brightness down. And don't forget, these tools work very well in conjunction with each other. So if I come over here to the vignette, I'm going to choose this mountain as my subject. And then I'm going to bring down the lighting a little bit, and I'm going to add a fair amount of inner light. And we can change the size, of the vignette and the amount. I'm not going to go into a full vignette tutorial, but let's just take a quick look. There's where we were. There's where we are now. And, you could have even gone off into some atmospheric haze and other things. But to me, the big story with Sky AI is working with placing that horizon line just where you want it. Okay, next on our list are the texture improvements. I'm going to go over here to this one for local masking. I'm going to choose adding a texture. So you can see we've got our texture selection here. And this is what I was talking about, that there are some different things that have been provided now with Luminar AI. So you've still got this opening just like you do with the Sky AI. So you have flares, sparklers, and then there are some things that I added of my own. So this light leak and bokeh, olefants, signatures, and these are things that you can add. So let's say that, let's have some fun. We'll play with a sparkler. And I'll just click, add this, and look, what do you know? We have pretty little hearts. And you notice the name, Love Around. This is basically the name that's coming from what you're choosing as the texture that you're adding in here. It used to just say, local AI adjustment is like basic or texture. As you add things now or remove them, it will start picking up the names of what you're doing. So you can tell which texture is which. Unfortunately, you cannot rearrange them. That is a recommendation that's gone into Skylum. Hopefully another update will come out and you can rearrange the textures. So for now, if you organize these things in a way and you want to change it, you have to remove the texture and then put them back in. So let's say that we're happy with that. We can change our opacity, add them up. We can flip them around back and forth, up and down. And then you have your additional settings. So you can blend these in now. So you've got all sorts of different changes that you can make. And it depends on your photograph as far as what you want to do. So I won't go over all of that. Just say that gives you a bit more options. You can change the brightness, so you can make your textures very bright, a little lower. You've got your contrast, saturation, and hue. And so let's go ahead and add another one. So we want to add a texture. And in this case, I want to add a watermark of my signature. So I'm going to come down here to signatures, and I've just added a couple here. There's one in black and one in white. This blue that you see here is kind of the transparent background. So don't let it fool you thinking that there's going to be blue that's going inside of your photo. So I'm going to add this white one. And you can see it is very large. It comes up at 50% opacity. So I'm going to place this texture just right there. Then I'm going to move this thing over so I can grab a handle and really drag this down. This is, I think, a 3000 pixel texture, so it's probably too large for most of what I need, but I would rather have the resolution, and that's why I put in such a large signature texture as a watermark. So let's say that I really only want something about that size. I tuck it down in the corner here, and maybe instead of 50, I want 75%. And I'm not going to worry about changing this at all. And that's it. So that you can very quickly and easily add your own watermark support. So like I said, there are new things in here. If you want to add your own textures, pull this down, go to Show Custom Textures, and it opens up the folder. And where it says Custom, you'll see there's a path down here. Basically, you put in the textures that you want, or a folder of the textures that you want. So I prefer doing folders, so that way when I come over here and I want to choose something, it shows up the folder, and that tells me what kind of things I'm going to find inside. So if we worked with flares, let's just pick one more. And you can see down here, the size of this was very small because of the last thing I did. So keep in mind, if you don't see it, take a look. It might be something that you just simply need to place your texture and then drag it out to the size that it needs to be for your photograph. Most of these ones that have come from Luminar, I would say, are things that probably will fill up the entire screen, but work with them to whatever level you want, and then you can kind of move them around and place them and work with it that way. All right, I chose this photograph because I've got a subject here, but also it's very easy to see the depth going behind her. So while I've opened this up and I come down here to Portrait Bokeh AI, it's going to start, when I add this, it's going to start scanning. And this one I've already opened, so it's probably got the depth map in there. So if it takes you a little while, don't worry, it only takes a few seconds. And this is the part I mentioned earlier, the Luminar AI that usually has an animation. Nothing's going on with that right now. That may change. You notice that there is a mask when I move the cursor over here. This is what was automatically generated by Luminar AI and the Portrait Bokeh AI tool. So if you need to change this mask, take a look over here at the brush control. You can see there is focus, so you can brush in focus, defocus, and restore will just set you back to your original. So if it masks something that you don't want, you can click on defocus and mask it away. If it does not mask something that you want, you can click on focus and brush it in. What I've found is if there's somebody with loose hair blowing in the breeze, sometimes it will kind of eliminate some of those strands of hair on the top of their head. I'll try to show you another demo to exemplify that. And you may need to brush that in a little bit. Although it's creating a very tight mask here, when you want to make adjustments, don't worry if it seems like it's not precise, like on the strands of their hair. You can do a very loose brush around it, and it gives you a nice result. So here's what we find. Let me take a look at before. So you can see what's in detail going on behind her, and you can see where it kind of stops right there. There are a number of tools down here. I pretty much am fine with the softness and opacity and the radius over here. Most of the work I do is here on the background. So I like this brightness. So if I want to really enhance my subject, I click on brightness and it darkens the area that's in bokeh. Or if I need to, I can brighten it up. So you've got control there. I'm going to reset this back to the middle. Highlights glow kind of brings out the highlights that are inside of your bokeh area. So I'll show you another image that's got some lights in it. And that kind of shows off this. The warmth and coolness you've seen in other tools. So if I want to warm this up a little bit, I can do that. And keep in mind, it's really working with the area that's in bokeh. Now, this is the one where it's kind of interesting. The more you go to the left, the more you bring the bokeh effect closer to your subject. The more you go to the right, the more you push it away. So I'm going to bring this all the way over here to the left. We'll let it calculate. And you can see behind her head, there is some mild bokeh, and as it goes off, it's going further away. In order to show that to you, I'm going to click on the before and after button. So take a look at her head and the area behind it, and you can see just how in focus that is. But there's a gradual transition from the area that's in focus to out of focus. Okay, so we have completely brought this to the forefront. It's not really believable because the focal plane is not going to just drop off right behind her tire and her like that, and yet still have some in the foreground. If you've ever worked with a very shallow depth of field lens, like a f1.4 or f1.2 lens, that plane is very, very narrow. So things in front are out of focus as well as things in back. This one is pretty much the background. So you can kind of scale this back. So I'm going to move this a little bit and watch on the grass beside her. You can see how it's moving back. And as I bring it back kind of almost to zero, you can see that it will scale back a little bit more. And then I can move it even further back. So you have control of how close the bokeh fade off is from your background to your subject. And it may or may not be where you want at the default. So that's why you've got control. If you want to bring it in a little closer and kind of blur out that background, I think that section here right now does a very good job of isolating her. If you have something that has edges that are kind of not quite masked properly, you can use this edges correction and it will work on that. In this case, it worked kind of on that basket. I don't know if you saw it or not, but we'll go ahead and change this a little bit. And it just kind of redefines some of the edges that you may need to change for your bokeh. And that's a quick look at the Portrait Bokeh tool. So that's it. That is what we get in Luminar AI update number 4. To me, this is a big update. I see a lot of potential here. I am going to create future videos on these different tools to show more detail of what's going on. This video was pretty much to kind of tell you what's new in update 4. But I really like this one. In my mind, I think this is the best update they've done yet. And they're still listening. They're taking customer feedback. So if you find something is not working quite the way you want, or there's a feature enhancement that you want. So for example, Portrait Bokeh AI is for humans only. If you want it to work for something else, give them your feedback. They listen to their customers, and we see the results of that feedback coming out in different enhancements to the product. Thank you so much for spending a little time for me. Which of these is your favorite feature? Is it the Portrait Bokeh AI? Is it going to be the changes to the Sky AI so you can more easily place it? Or maybe what you can do with textures now? Maybe it's one of the bug fixes. Let me know in the comments below. I'd really be happy to hear what it is that helps you make your photos better. And with that in mind, thanks so much. If you like this video, please click the like button. That will tell YouTube that I'm doing something right. They will share this with more people. It helps the channel grow, and it only takes you a moment to do it. Thanks so much. I'll see you again in the next video.